Raise your hand if you've ever uttered the phrase, "I have no sense of rhythm," or, "Oh, yeah, rhythm, that's really not my strong suit," or anything along those lines. Rhythm is a common complaint among piano students. I'm here today to tell you that 1, you do have a sense of rhythm, and 2, what's maybe actually causing your problems and how to fix it. Let's get into it. And 2, and 3, and... So first things first, let's start with a little bit of myth busting. Are there people who just simply do not have a sense of rhythm? I personally don't think so. I don't think that this is a thing. I believe that every human being on the planet Earth has an innate sense of rhythm, and we're going to talk about why in just a minute. As it comes to piano, yes, there are students who struggle with rhythm, but that does not mean that those students don't have a sense of rhythm and that they're not capable of developing that skill. Maybe you're one of those students who has an issue with rhythm and you feel like you struggle with rhythm and you're thinking to yourself right now, I can't even clap along to the radio with a steady beat. That happens sometimes, sure, but I still think that you do have an innate sense of rhythm. What do I mean by that? You have a heartbeat that's more or less regular. You have been breathing in a steady rhythm the entire time you've been watching this video without thinking about it and without needing to control it. And I bet that you have a steady rhythm when you're walking down the street. All of this is rhythm. You have a sense of rhythm. It's in our bodies. There's no escaping it. My older brother is not a musician, never studied music, never interested in music, and he has told me a few times when we were younger that he doesn't have a sense of rhythm. However, he was quite a good high school basketball player, and he could dribble down the court sprinting and keep the ball under control. That is a rhythmic activity. I cannot do that. I do not want to do that. And does that mean that I don't have a sense of rhythm because I can't do that rhythmic activity? Of course not. A lot of it just comes down to what you're interested in and what you're willing to train and what you've spent time developing. On the flip side of that, my brother got stuck driving me around a lot in high school. I always kind of tagged along where he was going. And I can assure you that he is a first-rate steering wheel drummer. No musical training. He assumes that he doesn't have a sense of rhythm because he hasn't had any sort of development in that area formally. But of course, he has the sense of rhythm, and he proves it anytime he's driving and starts playing the drums on the steering wheel. So have you caught the underlying theme yet? First, one more time, I'm going to say it for the skeptics in the back, a natural sense of rhythm is not the issue here. Everybody has a natural sense of rhythm. So what is the issue? The issue is training. And if it comes down to training, it's something we can learn. This is something that every single person can learn. You have the foundations for this. You, on a daily basis, are using rhythms whether you realize it or not. So it comes down to getting the right training. With all of that said, I want you to promise me here and now that you're never again going to say, I don't have a sense of rhythm or anything along those lines. So what is the problem? The problem comes down to training. I can't sprint down the basketball court dribbling a basketball because I don't want to put in the time that I need to develop those skills. It's not that I don't have the rhythm that I need to do it, and it's not that I don't have the potential to do it, I just don't want to. And a lot of piano students fall into this trap of thinking they don't have a sense of rhythm because something in their musical training needs a little bit extra emphasis. It's not even necessarily the rhythm in and of itself. Rhythm tends to struggle if we have anything in our learning process that's holding us back a little bit. Playing piano is a highly complex skill, and there are a lot of elements that go into it. And as soon as any one of those need a little bit extra attention, rhythm kind of gets put on the back burner for a minute because music happens in time, and if we need extra time to think about something, then of course the rhythm is going to have some issues, whether we actually have issues with rhythm or not. So let's dive into what these problems are. What problems can affect rhythm? We're going to cover 4 things. I think we're going to cover 4 things. We're going to talk about 4 things that influence your ability to play with steady rhythm, with a strong sense of rhythm at the piano. The first of these skills is interpreting symbols. What do I mean by that? Music is written on a page with rather abstract symbols that we have to look at, understand, and turn into something that we can hear in the real world. If you're not really clear on what these symbols mean, then of course you're going to have troubles turning that rhythm into something that you can feel in your body, and in turn into something that you can hear in the time and space around you. It sounds simple, but there's actually a lot that goes into it. It takes recognizing the symbol on the page, understanding how many beats that symbol is supposed to receive, feeling that rhythm so that you can count that rhythm, so that you can produce that rhythm. And all of those things start to play together. This is a little bit like learning a new language. When you're first learning a new language, you see the letters on the page, you maybe recognize the letters on the page, but every language, the letters interact a little bit differently and create different sounds, even if it's the same letters that we use when we're speaking English. And so for example, let's say you're learning German and you've learned to recognize the letters for the word Schreibtisch. You recognize the letters, you understand when you see that combination of letters that it means desk, but you're still not quite sure what it sounds like when you see those written out. We need both elements here. We need to know what the symbol looks like and what that means, and how that's going to sound around us. How can you test this skill to see if you're comfortable recognizing the symbols and turning them into sounds? We can do a little test. Let's look at a few rhythms together, and I want you to hit pause on the video when you see them so that you can count and clap it out on your own. And then we're going to count and clap it out together. And if you notice that something sounds different, then that's a sign that this is a skill that you should be working on regularly when you sit down to practice. Let's take this rhythm for example. I'm going to do what we call I'm just going to count the note values. I'm not going to be counting the measures. So if it's a quarter note, it gets 1 beat. If it's a half note, we're going to count 1, 2, and so on. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. If that went well, let's move on to example 2. And this one we're going to do what we call metric counting. So now we are going to be counting the entire measure. 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, if that went well, but you're still skeptical and you still think, no, I think rhythm is my issue, those were too easy. They're simple rhythms, that's true, but they are foundational and they are common rhythms. And if you caught on to it, the rhythm for the first example is from Jingle Bells, and the rhythm from the second example is London Bridge is Falling Down, in case you wondered, this rings a bell. If you want to keep testing this idea, what you can do is you can take the music that you're learning and clap out the different melodies or the different lines, and then compare that back with recordings of the pieces that you're working on and see if you're able to manage that. Or sit down with music that you've never played before and do the same sort of thing. You can test this on your own. It's just a matter of consciously taking the symbols and turning them into rhythms that you can hear. If you're able to do this without any trouble, it probably means that interpreting the symbols and in general a sense of rhythm isn't what's holding you back. If you did find it difficult, what I want you to do is approach every single piece that you're learning by counting and clapping out the rhythms for at least the next month on a daily basis. You don't have to do it for 20 minutes. Just sit down and say, okay, today I'm clapping out the first 4 measures, and I want you to really consciously incorporate this into your practice routine. If you do that, you're going to start developing this sense of rhythm and start just more automatically turning the symbols that you're seeing onto the page into something that you can hear, which is of course the end goal. Our next checkpoint where a lot of students get stuck is the reading skills. Often rhythm gets thrown by the wayside because we're concentrating on reading the notes. We need more time to find the notes and to figure out what notes we need and bringing all of that together. And by the time you get that figured out, of course the rhythm hasn't worked out like it's supposed to, because rhythm happens in time, and if you need more time, by definition, the rhythm isn't going to be what you were hoping for. How do we test for this one? It's a little bit tricky to isolate because we tend to learn music that's at a more difficult level than we're able to sight read. And that's absolutely fine. I am by no means saying that you shouldn't learn music that's stretching your abilities and that's, look, the harder music tends to be more interesting, right? And if you feel like you need to learn a lot of easy pieces just because it's what you should do, I really like the phrase, stop shoulding all over yourself. Because life is too short for that. There is no should here. We want to be learning music that we really love. I'm all on board for that. So how do we test this skill? Basically, it boils down to if you need to read through a passage, let's talk hands separately for starters, right? Because reading hands together is also more complicated. If you need to read through a passage more than a few times to be able to get the right notes and the right rhythms, then there's room for improvement in your reading skills. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't play pieces that are a challenge, and that doesn't mean that you need to stop playing the music you love until you've improved your reading skills. Just dedicate time on a daily basis to sight reading and to spending at least 5 minutes a day just reading something new. It doesn't have to be hands together, it doesn't have to be complicated, but do find the right level for you that it's enough of a challenge that you're making progress, but it's not so difficult that you completely lose sight of the rhythm either. I just recently released a new tutorial on sight reading skills and how to improve your reading skills. I'll link to that below, check that out, and I'm also going to be recording a few new fun tutorials about reading that will be coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that also if that's a skill that you're looking to improve. Next up, if rhythm and reading aren't the culprits, you might want to check out coordination. If you feel like you have trouble playing hands together, that might be what's tripping you up. This often looks like you're able to play the music really well hands separately, rhythm's working out great, you're not searching for notes, you've got all of that under control, but then when it comes time to put it together, it sort of feels like a three-legged race, and it's two things that are being controlled by two different brains, and they're not communicating with each other, and everything's getting jumbled and tripped. It's a common issue. The easiest way to approach coordination is really just to slow everything down, because again, music happens in time, and often when we're struggling, it just means we need more time to process. And so if you're having trouble with coordination, it really just boils down to you need to slow things down so that you can get everything nice and ironed out, and then you're going to be able to move forward. Other ways to work on coordination, you can find exercises. Again, I have a relatively new tutorial that I released. I'll link to that in the description below. And there are loads and loads and loads of piano exercises. Too many to ever play through in a lifetime. If this is something you feel like you struggle with, there are resources available to you. Last but not least, you might be struggling with rhythm because you're playing music that's really challenging for you. And that's okay. In fact, that's great. We learn and we grow the most from the pieces that really challenge us and really stretch us to our limits. And that's really kind of the sweet spot. That's where every single day we show up and we're learning something new and we're making progress. It's a great feeling. It can also be an overwhelming feeling if you don't temper it a little bit. So I would encourage you, if that's your issue when it comes to rhythm, that yes, keep working on the pieces that you adore, keep learning the big pieces, keep having fun with those, but also be sure that you have a few smaller pieces, because it can be defeating if we're only ever working on really hard music. We want something a little bit simpler so that every single practice session when you sit down, you feel like you've really accomplished something. Not just that you've stretched yourself to your limits, but also that, yeah, I feel like that's coming together. I'm getting that down. And those quick wins are also invaluable to staying motivated in the practice world. Next week I am releasing a video that's taking you through a 4-step process on how to approach rhythm in these tricky pieces that really push you. So do hit subscribe if you've not already subscribed to the channel, and keep an eye out for that video that will be coming out next week. So let me know in the comments below, which of these points do you feel like is tripping you up in your practice? Which one do you feel like is holding your rhythm back a little bit? And what's your solution? How are you going to work on it? What's your practice strategy going to be in the next weeks and months? I can't wait to hear from you. And until next time,